They have things like initiatives to keep children in school longer, participation rates, like the school completion programme is one. And they have a lot of professional development activities for teachers, and they have facilitators going into schools to show teachers how to deliver literacy and numeracy programmes, for example, because that is a big issue. These children have much poorer rates of reading and maths ability than in non-DEIS schools.
But a lot of these kids still come from junior infant and senior infant too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they come in and they have the small classes till second class, and then they go back in, but are somewhat smaller classes than the mainstream schools.
Are most of those disadvantaged parents, like in a DESH one, are they taking advantage of the preschool too?
Some of them have. That's one of the, I suppose, the downsides of DESH. There was to be a preschool element that was in the original plan, but it never came to pass. I think there were a couple of things that happened. The money wasn't really there. Logistically, it was very difficult to match every primary school with a preschool, and the government brought in a universal preschool year for everybody. So that meant that the impetus wasn't there then to create dedicated preschools for DESH schools. So that was probably from a policy point of view, it was a political move, but it wasn't a very good one from the point of view of disadvantage, because it just gave everybody, you know,
it's a rising tide for
it was
everyone.
equality, but it wasn't equity, if you know what I mean. So it gave everybody the same opportunity, but it didn't give some people what they would have needed to do better out of the schooling system. So, yeah, I mean, DESH is a multifaceted programme to deal with the multifaceted issue, which is education disadvantage.
But it's working.
It appears to be having positive outcomes. Certainly, if you ask people involved, they say it has. Outcomes have gone up in terms of numeracy and literacy since the programme began, and that's the first time that's ever been observed in evaluation.
I know they have like a liaison that goes out, and do they only have that in the DESH schools?
It's now limited to DESH schools, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And how is that? I mean, I guess the evidence would support that's...
Are you talking about the homeschool liaison person?
Because that's something that really almost doesn't exist in the US.
Yeah, it's probably a flagship programme in the Irish education system. I think it's very highly regarded here and elsewhere. It's actually, at the moment, we're doing a study of that. We're just putting the data in as we speak. And we surveyed the coordinators, the liaison people themselves last year, and we're in the process of just putting all that information together, asking them what the issues are now, because the last time we looked, it was about 10 years ago, longer, to see what the issues are that the families have to do with at the moment, as opposed to 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And we're asking them how they spend their time in terms of the percentage of time in a given week or a given day they spend doing things like home visits with families, taking children for individual, sometimes they do tuition or whatever, they help individual children with difficulties, helping the teachers, liaising with community agencies and all of that kind of thing.
What about medical and dental programs? Do they provide that for those kids too?
It's not a school-based thing, although there's a lot of movement now towards trying to get all of those things, to kind of oil the wheels with that, because you would have found that children who need services, suppose a kid needs a dental appointment and they have to leave the school to go and get that. Sometimes the parents aren't in a position to go and get them from the school and bring them. So they miss the appointment, and therefore, the more middle class parents, they're able to go and get the kid, bring them to the dental appointment. So they're trying to bring the services in more into the schools now, and that's happening, for example, with things like speech and language therapy. And I imagine that ultimately, in the disadvantaged schools anyway, there will be a lot more cooperation between, and there should be, between the HSE and the education department. And the other departments that are relevant to this are things like local authorities and housing and so on. And ultimately you would expect that if there's really to be any progress made in this, that they would stop building big housing projects in certain areas of the city and then plonking a school next to them, and that they would have more mixed developments and cooperative housing. And there's very, very limited numbers of those, although the aspiration is there to have them, they tend not to have them.
Mixed meaning what? Business?
Mixed meaning social mix.
So
a mixture of owner-occupiers and people renting privately and from the local authority. Yeah,
but that's because that's not a common thing in the US too.
It's not a common thing
so
here.
So that's why you have so many different socioeconomic levels, right? you
But in
know.
Ireland you get pockets right next to each
Mhm.
other, so they're all very tight next to each other
Mhm.
because of how urban planning
Yes.
has happened in
So
Ireland.
active planning.
So yeah, so you get like pockets of disadvantage right next to very advantaged areas, right,
Mhm.
like right next to each other,
Mhm.
in especially in the cities. So
Going to the same school or different?
Very often go to different schools.
Yeah.
Different schools.
And that's where the parental choice.
Oh, so they
there'll
want,
be
they don't
multiple
want the
schools in the
kids
area,
in the bad schools, so we'll put
Yeah.
them in the good schools. Yeah.
and some families will ask their children to travel,
Yeah.
get on buses maybe 20-30 minutes
Yeah.
longer,
Mhm.
go to the next town or go to the somewhere else in the city to go to a school.
Right.
There's a school about a mile from here, which is a boys' school, and it's a fee-paying school. And it's right in the heart of the inner city, and surrounding it it's probably not as bad as it used to be, but very, very poor social housing and, huge unemployment levels and so on. And virtually nobody that attends that school lives in the local area. They're all bussed in from the leafy suburbs,
Mhm.
or
But
driven in.
fee pay, they would pay as high as how much? Or they could?
I don't know. I mean, it's not incredibly expensive. There's one that's being built for international workers out in the south side somewhere that's very
It's
expensive.
like in tens to thousands.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Really?
10 or 12 a year or something
Yeah.
or more.
€1,000 per plus what the government gives them?
But I know Loretta on the Green is 4,000 a year.
That's a lot.
That's just a day attendance.
Yeah.
Mhm.
A daisy down for there, and I know.
Yeah.
But that's fairly reasonable. I think some of them are a lot more than that.
Is that 120?
I think it might be 20,
I
yeah.
think it's-
20,000?
Yeah.
It's
But
been
no,
targeted
I'm not
at
sure- yeah.
international.
I'm not sure it's going to get any state support though, is it?
No, I don't.
No,
think so.
I think it's a completely independent school.
Can international kids of the workers, they can go to school here,
Yeah.
right?
Any school, yeah.
Any school?
Yeah.
But this school is specifically targeting families who might be moving here for a few years at a time.
Mhm.
That's it.
And they'll be working. I think it's financial services.
Financial
or tech.
services, that kind
Yeah.
of stuff, yeah.
Do they have much problem with illegal immigration here?
We have some.
Yeah.
It's not a massive problem, I don't think.
Do they have to show papers to go to school, or then schools
No.
just take them in?
No.
And even there's a group which is particularly problematic and there's nothing, it's something kind of ashamed of, but there's a direct provision, what's called direct provision for people who come here like asylum seekers,
Mm-hmm.
and while their claim is being processed, they're housed in what's called direct provision, which is like everybody living together and their meals provided and stuff. And that's awful, but one good thing is that they have the same entitlements to
Mhm.
first and second level schooling
Mm.
as anybody else.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just causes a problem at third level. then.
Because of
Yeah.
At the college level,
Yeah.
they wouldn't be able to.
If the families are in direct provision for a long time and they don't get out of direct provision, if their claim to stay in Ireland hasn't been processed in that time,
Mhm.
the students, once they leave post-primary, they then don't have a right to attend third level education,
Mhm.
regardless of how well they've
Yeah.
been achieving in school.
Mhm.
But effectively, if the child of the appropriate age is brought to the school
Mhm.
and there are places in the school, then the school has to accept
Mhm.
Yeah.
that.
How about special education? How's that treated here?
Well, there are some special schools, and they tend to have primary and second level children in them, so they span the neither primary or I think they might have primary school roll numbers,
Yes.
but they have both, all the age groups.
Can parents have the option to send them to a standalone special ed school, or have
That's a
them?
decision the parents make, is it?
It's still the case in special schools. I think the answer to your question is the ground is shifting
Right.
Yeah.
a lot in that area. But and the favoured policy is where it's all possible that children with special needs are educated in mainstream schools.
Right.
But there still are a large number of special schools,
Mhm.
and the proportion of students of the student body attending special schools has
Yeah.
not declined
Mhm.
significantly, despite the fact that all this mainstreaming is
Mhm.
going on. But to get into a special school, I think you still have to have a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You still have to be able to prove that the child has
Mhm.
a significant
Additional.
need, and the because mainstreaming is favoured, there's in effect a second hurdle that people have to cross, which is, are you sure this child can't be accommodated
Mhm.
in an open school?
You think mainstreaming is favored because the research shows that, or because it costs less to?
Oh,
There's a whole range of reasons, I think.
Yeah.
The drive for inclusivity over the
Mhm.
last few years is one of them. And I think there is research to show that it's more effective because,
Mhm.
well, I don't know why, but the teachers take responsibility for all of the children in the classroom, and the learning support teachers are supposed to be working in tandem with the teacher rather than withdrawing children for individual support and stigmatising them and
Mhm.
you know all the things that go with that. So yeah, I think that is the drive, although I think we're a long way away from getting towards complete inclusion.
Mhm.
It requires an additional support model in mainstream schools to facilitate
Right.
students. So there's a lot of SNA, like assistance for students with additional needs.
Mhm.
So there's the numbers of those SNAs have grown a lot
Yeah.
now in the last 5 or 10 years.
I only say that because my son is special ed, and I saw him go through the school system, and it wasn't a good thing because a lot of times he just sat in the corner.
Mm.
The teacher was too tied up,
That's
and there was only one option, and it was a mainstream.
true.
That's just how it was. So.
I think one of the problems we have with the Irish education system, and it's not as a society problem, is the gap, the rich-poor gap.
Uh-huh.
That we haven't managed to crack that yet. Although debt is, as you said, it's quite promising.